Kaden and Ruby was watching a horror movie about a young man age 23 named James Cord, a man living a dull life. He sighed deeply as he stuck his key in the front door, the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders. Another day, another mind-numbing pile of paperwork conquered. The hours had dragged on, each document blurring into the next. He was a man of routine, a creature of habit. Every morning he followed the same steps. Wake up, brush his teeth, prepare a simple breakfast, and head to work. His life was a predictable pattern of work, eat, sleep, repeat. The monotony was both comforting and suffocating. But tonight, something felt off. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, a quiet that seemed to hum with tension. The sky felt unearthly and strange. A strange tingling sensation crawled beneath his skin, like tiny electric shocks dancing along his nerves. He brushed it off as fatigue, convincing himself it was just the result of another long, exhausting day. The house was quiet, as always. The silence was a familiar companion, yet tonight it felt almost oppressive. His wife was on a business trip. The silence was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the usual hum of their shared life. He tossed his keys on the table, the metallic clang echoing through the empty house, amplifying the loneliness he felt. He wished he could see his wife, she always so busy and rarely ever called him. The tingling intensified. He felt dizzy, lightheaded, as if the room was spinning around him. The TV turned on, making loud static. He stumbled towards the living room, his vision blurring. The walls seemed to close in on him, and then he took his medicine and went to bed. Everything went black. The darkness swallowed him whole.
James's eyes flickered open. He lay on something rough and cold.
The floor? But why was it so close? He tried to sit up, his hand connecting with something hard and smooth. He was in his living room, but everything looked different, larger, more menacing, and everything was scattered everywhere, which gave him a bizarre uneasiness. He knew how his wife got when she saw a mess in the house.
He then glanced down at his hands. They were tiny. Shrunken, he was ant-sized. Panic surged through him. This couldn't be real. It had to be a dream. A sick, twisted nightmare.
He tried to stand, his legs wobbling like a newborn deer. He felt a strange lightness, a detachment from his own body. He was in a warped dimension. He had no control over his new, twisted reality. A giggle came from outside that sounded eerily familiar. James froze, his blood turning to ice. It sounded like his wife, Alexia Cord.
Then the door creaked open. He looked in terror as he saw her. A monstrous figure emerged. It was his wife, now a giantess who was cold, calculated, and annoyed. But her features were enormous and eerie. She was beautiful, tall, and had a bizarre glow in her eyes. They were wide and vacant. It stared down at him with a terrifying intensity.
James, what the hell happened?
Why is everything a mess? That's it, I'm going to have to punish you.
Her giant high heel tapped menacingly as her eyes glowed and her hands were on her hips. Fear coiled around his throat, choking him. He was in deep trouble with his giantess of a wife. She then stomped towards him, her disgust in her eyes sending shivers down his spine. He scrambled backward, his tiny legs struggling to propel him across the vast expanse of the floor. He yelled up at her, "Alexia, no, please don't! It's not my fault I didn't do this! Don't hurt me! I'm sorry!" He begged and screamed.
Kaden and Ruby munched on popcorn, their eyes glued to the television screen. The movie, a low-budget horror flick, was ridiculous. Yet he couldn't tear his eyes away. He looked at Ruby. She was into it too. A little too into it. Her eyes sparkled with a bizarre light, the same as the giantess. She loved the idea of becoming one, and it made her have dark, disturbing thoughts. It excited her. Kaden looked at her strange behavior and shrugged it off and continued watching the movie. The scene, a tiny man at the mercy of an evil giantess that was his wife who tormented him, his terror palpable, sent a shiver down Kaden's spine, but it was very fascinating and disturbing at the same time. He chuckled nervously. It was just a movie. Special effects, fiction, nothing to be scared of.
The credits rolled as the man screamed, as he was grabbed by his gigantic wife. She then treated him as a toy as he screamed even more as she did evil things to him. The unsettling feeling lingered in Kaden. He always liked tall women, but something was off about this film. It made him feel disturbed and helpless. The giant woman was inhuman, bizarre, a monster that was resembling the uncanny valley and behaved in an exaggerated personality with psychopathic tendencies and sadism. It was creepy to witness. It was even more eerie when he realized his friend Ruby had just disappeared when the film ended. Kaden then left the theater, the sudden silence deafening and ominous. He stretched, his muscles stiff from sitting too long. He felt strange, dizzy, lightheaded, like the feeling James Cord got. He dismissed it as a side effect of too much popcorn and too much horror. He then went to the bathroom. He felt a wave of nausea, his stomach churning. He could hear the screaming of James from the movie echo in the bathroom, like he was being choked. This started to bother Kaden, more and more unnerving him. Kaden went to his car, then something bizarre happened before he could start it up. His body felt light, cold, and alien. He then passed out. Kaden woke up with a gasp. He was still in his car. Then he could hear echoing laughter. It was childlike and creepy. He tried to leave the car, but it was locked. He was trapped in his own car. The keys were outside. As it rained, the keys drifted away forever into a dark abyss. Panic surged through him as the ground started to shake. He looked outside in horror as everything outside was gigantic. He was on a huge metal sidewalk in the middle of nowhere, like in the horror film becoming his new reality. A evil, distorted and childlike giggle, high-pitched and chilling, got louder as the car shook. Kaden tried to call someone, the police, but they didn't respond to his calls. Kaden then saw a huge red boot stomp in front of him. The car spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see a gigantic hand, that of a girl with red nails, grab the car. The car was then lifted up to a huge, beautiful, familiar face. It was Ruby Sparks, but something was different. She was now a terrifying giantess. She looked down at Kaden with mischief and the same glow and excitement in her eyes from when she watched the movie. It was terrifying. Then her red lips smashed against the window of the car, engulfing him in darkness. Her lips curled into a wide, unsettling grin. "Oh, my beloved Kaden, are you all right? If you ever got hurt, I don't know what I'd do. I love you so much, Kaden. So much." Her voice boomed, breaking the glass windows. Kaden shouted as it smacked him in his face, but it didn't get in his eyes, but some cut him on his cheek.
"Ruby, what's going on?" Kaden said in terror.
His voice came out a tiny squeak. He was an ant to his beautiful giantess cheerleader friend. She took a look inside the car, her enchanting blue eyes magnified to terrifying proportions. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, Caddy. I was too loud and hurt you. I'll have to make it up to you and give you a kiss to heal your wounds." He felt a surge of terror, raw and primal. He was trapped, a tiny prisoner in his own car to this giant version of his beautiful friend. She saw him as a toy now. Kaden became more and more terrified of this version of Ruby. Normally, Ruby was a beautiful girl with a blonde ponytail who wore a vibrant red cheerleader dress, had a red bow on her head, who was a little strange and a little obsessive with her crush on him. But she was warm, beautiful and pretty, nice and loved him after all. She was his childhood friend. Now she had transformed into an over-exaggeration of her former self. She was a giantess, an obsessed psychopathic predator. Her crush and love for him turned into a disturbing desire to dominate, prey on Kaden, love, capture and keep him. As if he were her tiny little toy or a pet, her giant size suffocated him. He was overwhelmed and completely helpless against her. She could eat him or crush him or torment him. The thoughts made his blood run cold. He was at her mercy. Ruby then dropped tiny Kaden in her soft, gigantic hand. She smiled down at him and boomed, "There we are, a toy store. We are going to have so much fun in here, my little Kaden. I think you belong here with me." She looked down at him like a disturbed predator, holding Kaden, trapping him in her soft, giant hand. She then took him inside a gigantic toy store. She then locked the door, trapping him inside. Ruby's eyes stared in Kaden's soul. Oh, my beloved,
My beloved Kaden, I love you so dearly.
Kaden was in terror as Ruby became more and more obsessive, more psychotic, pinning him down and playing with him as a toy. Kaden looked in terror as Ruby held him in her grip, holding flowers, and had psychopathy in her eyes. Oh, flowers for me, my beloved. Thank you, I think you deserve a kiss. Her hand got tighter and tighter, holding him hostage. As she kissed him, her huge lips rubbing down on him, Kaden struggled. No, Ruby, don't! She laughed, acting like he was being overdramatic. She tasted him and licked him as Kaden screamed. Ruby then said in a disturbed tone, "Oh God, I would just love to eat you up. My love for you is never ending. I could torment you with my love forever. So cute, so sweet, so delectable, so delicious, and you're all mine." As Ruby kissed him, her lips consuming him, Kaden panicked Ruby was going to eat him, her obsession getting more disturbing by the second. Kaden begged her to stop, but she just got more unhinged and insane. As she then put him on the floor in a toy city, Ruby smiled down at him and her voice boomed through his tiny body. "Run, little Kaden, run, a giant is coming. A giant is coming, which is me. I'm a beautiful and pretty gigantic monster, and I want to dominate your tiny little world and love and torment you."
He could hear her heavy footsteps of her red boots and psychopathic insane laughter vibrating through the floorboards, echoing through the room, each step a tremor that threatened to crack him in half. The shadow engulfed him as the toy city was completely destroyed. He looked up at her in horror. She was a beautiful monster. Her red cheerleader dress looked like it was made out of blood, and her blue eyes were vibrant, hypnotic, and menacing, her eyes staring down at him with sinister, playful intensity. She looked down at him and said, "Roar! My little plaything, you're mine. You're mine, oh my beloved," she said in a disturbed sing-song. Then a gigantic, beautiful hand was descending upon him, its fingers like thick, fleshy sausages. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the impact. He was going to be captured. He wanted to escape this horror, but there was no escape. My breath hitched in my throat as Ruby's hand shot out, scooping me up from the floor. The sudden movement made my heart race, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her grip was firm, and I knew there was no escape.
He thrashed wildly, his tiny fists pounding against her palm. Each strike was futile, barely making an impact. The more he struggled, the tighter her grip seemed to become. It was a hopeless battle, and deep down he knew it. Ruby then boomed, Don't struggle, Kaden. I will make you love me."
I felt a strange detachment from my own body, like I was watching the scene unfold from outside myself. It was as if I was a mere spectator to my own nightmare, powerless to change anything. The surreal nature of the situation made it even more terrifying. I yelled, "Let me go! Let me go! No!"
She brought him closer to her face, her eyes gleaming with a disturbing amusement. Her smile was wide and unsettling, a clear indication of the pleasure she got from his fear he was just like James from the movie. Ruby loved her power over him, and his helplessness. She delusionally believed he loved it too. Her eyes glowed with a predatory glint. It was a look that sent chills down his tiny spine. "My little Kaden, you're my toy!" Kaden yelled. "No, Ruby, no, stop! Please, I can't be your toy. Please, Ruby, I'm your friend. You can't do this to me," he screamed and cried, feeling so helpless and betrayed by his friend. Ruby looked down at him with her huge eyes, comforting him. "Don't be afraid, my beloved Kaden. I will protect you from me, you will see." He could smell the faint scent of her breath as her voice boomed around him, root beer and bubblegum, things Kaden loved. It was a stark contrast to the horror of the situation. It filled his senses, making it hard to think clearly. She could manipulate his sense to try to manipulate and control him, trying to use his fantasies, wants and desires against him, tormenting him. Then she deposited him into a dark, cramped space, a huge box. The sudden change from light to darkness was disorienting. He felt the walls closing in around him, the air thick and stifling. He realized with horror it was her old toy box, the same one Kaden and Ruby played with when they were kids. The once innocent container now seemed like an evil prison, a place where nightmares were stored. The worn-out edges and faded colors only added to the eerie atmosphere. He landed on something soft and yielding. Other people, tiny men. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't alone in this nightmare. The soft surface was made up of millions of dead tiny figures that were all trapped just like him. These millions of tiny, shrunken men were dehumanized, their body warped and broken and deformed, their faces forever frozen in expressions of terror, unable to speak or cry for help. Each face told a story of fear and despair, a testament to the horrors they had endured when they used to be alive and the endless torment that Ruby Sparks put them through. They all were collected and used as decoration, put in poses of the agony they experienced. All of this was done by Ruby, a girl who he thought was nice, beautiful and innocent, but he realized she was a deranged, depraved, disturbed, psycho killer who loved to prey on and capture tiny little men and do unspeakable things to them, kill and play with them and keep them frozen forever, stuck in a limbo of being dead and alive, forever at the mercy of their gigantic captor and the same fate Kaden was about to end up in. It was the most horrifying, unsettling, unnerving, disturbing sight he'd ever seen, one that was burned into his mind and would haunt him and give him nightmares forever. Ruby's laughter, high-pitched and chilling and beautiful, like sweet honey and poison, reverberated through the toy box. She looked down at him. "You are so cute, and forever mine. I will love you so dearly. You're my little toy." She blew a kiss at him. "I'm your god, little Kaden, and I will keep you like this forever, my beloved. I love you so much, and I'm never letting you go." She then towered over him and stares down at Kaden. Her beauty magnified, she had a cute, smug smile and amazement at his tiny size. Like he was a toy on display, Kaden was dehumanized, tormented, and was forever trapped to this monster in red who wanted to love him and dominate his world. She was suffocating, and he felt like even when she wasn't there, she was always watching him. I curled into a ball and cried, my heart pounding against my ribs. I was surrounded by the frozen, terrified faces of the deceased tiny people in Ruby's toy box, their eyes forever wide with fear, their bodies warped for eternity, stuck in a pose of their torment. I was trapped in a horrifying situation, turned into a toy by a deranged, gigantic, psychopathic cheerleader girl in red who was beautiful, pretty, and is absolutely insane and wants to become God. Kaden was Ruby's little toy that she always loved, and she would never let him free. He was her plaything, an object in her gigantic blue eyes. Even in his dreams, Ruby would tower over him and capture him, showering him with dark affection and do unspeakable things to him. Her love was pure evil and sick and twisted. Kaden knew his life was all over. He was once a famous high school jock, now reduced and denigrated by his beautiful and cute cheerleader friend Ruby, and was now her little toy forever.